Hi, this is a quick start for the cloud storage service. Cloud storage allows you to provision buckets and upload files and manipulate files right from within observable notebooks. You can even synchronize these buckets with files on your local file system and manipulate them like normal operating system folders. So it's a great feature with a lot of potential. However, getting the initial bucket provisioned is a little bit of work, so this is why this quick start's going to get you up and running as quickly as possible. The storage API follows an infrastructure as code paradigm, so you declare what bucket you want, which will pop up a UI. So the notebook holds your desired state of reality, and the UI offers you a button which tells the system to try and make reality match your desired state. Sometimes it will fail. That's okay. For this error, there's a race condition with updating the rules, so this one's safe to just retry. Now the UI is showing us that the current state of reality matches our desired state, so now we can move on. We've provisioned a bucket. Next thing we want to do is create a storage client. The storage client is initialized with a GS link. You can reference that from the output of the bucket provisioning UI, or you can just put a literal in here. So there's no need to actually provision the bucket in the same place that you use the bucket. The storage client is a Firebase storage client. The first thing we hit is that we don't have permissions to list the files. Only notebook admins are able to do these privileged operations of uploading files and listing files. So we open up a sign-in form. The sign-in form accepts a web URL as an identity. This can be the user's own homepage, or it can be a link to a profile on a well-known website. Regardless of where this web page is hosted, we need to link it somehow to the observable profile of the owner of the notebook. So ideally, your web sign-in identity URL should be a home page. But to quickly get started with trying out the storage service, you can create a home page using a serverless cell and protect that identity with a password. One preliminary step needed is to encrypt our password so that we can store it in a notebook. We are not storing a secret as well, so then we can just take the payload just for the fact that it understands passwords. And we save that payload as a secret for later. Next, we import the password identity helper function and its code sample. We adapt the code sample observable profile to be the URL of our real observable profile and set the secret payload to be our password protected payload. After this is published, the serverless cell that the password identity function wraps will be able to read your configuration and serve a web page at the URL it exports. This web page is simple. It has two links. One link is decorated with the relation authorization endpoint, which tells IndieAuth that we're supplying our own OAuth provider, and the other link is decorated with the relation me, which says my observable profile is the same identity as the owner of the web page you are viewing. For the rel me auth protocol to accept that the observable profile is the same identity, that profile also has to be configured to point back to the password identity URL. Once these web pages are bidirectionally linked, we can use the authorization endpoint of one of them to authenticate as the identity of the other. For us, that means we can log in using our observable profile URL, but choose our own authentication provider. Supplying your own authorization endpoint is known as IndieAuth, but you can also delegate identity checks to a well-known OAuth provider. We currently support GitHub. You don't need to actually log in with your Observable profile. It just has to be linked to whatever URL you do log in with. IndieAuth redirects to the user-supplied authorization endpoint. For us, it's a password check. And ta-da! Our web sign-in shows that we're now signed in under that URL. In order to execute privileged operations, the signed-in URL has to have demonstrated ownership of an observable profile. So there's a helper variable which shows you which profiles that URL owns, and you just need to double check that does state your user ID on Observable. If that's correct, you'll be able to execute these privileged operations now, like listing files. The other important operation you'll be able to do is upload files to your bucket. The storage notebook contains a code snippet for a very simple upload chooser. It has a dependency on the hypertext literal. Once set up, you can choose files on your local file system and it will automatically upload them into your bucket. To retrieve files, you ask the storage client to get a download URL. The file uploader uploads files with a prefix of /public, which means these download links are available to anyone, anywhere on the internet. You can use these URLs in just normal HTML elements like images. So even if we sign out and refresh the page, the image element will still work. Files uploaded elsewhere won't be public. Operations permitted is gated by Firebase storage rules. We supply default ones, but you can fully customize your authorization logic if you wish. That's it. I hope the quick start's been helpful. Enjoy the storage features.